Hello. This might be a noisy one this week because they're demolishing the house next door just outside that window. So, those listening, I hope you can hear. Because this is a sermon for the 16th of August 2026, and that was the 20th in Ordinary Time, Year A. Just one reading today Genesis 45, verses 1 to 15. And this reading is when Joseph, down in Egypt, finally makes himself known to his brothers that have come down because of the famine. But in order to understand this particular reading, you really need to know the backstory and the chapters leading up to it. So I'm going to go over that briefly on the way in. When famine strikes hard in Israel, Jacob and his sons are left with no other choice than to seek help from a powerful and rather intimidating neighbour, Egypt. Indeed, many countries in the region were in the same plight according to Genesis chapter 41. 10 of Jacob's sons set off to buy grain, leaving their youngest brother, Benjamin, with his father at home. Benjamin is now Jacob's new favourite, for, like Joseph, he was a child of Rachel, Jacob's first love. When they arrived in Egypt, they failed to recognize their long-lost brother, Joseph, whom they had sold many years earlier into Midianite slavery. So the brothers bow down before their brother, just as Joseph had seen in his dreams years before, and which had been the catalyst in many ways for his expulsion from the family. But Joseph recognizes them. Genesis 42. However, Joseph hides his identity from them, pretending he needs an interpreter. Joseph also pretends that he thinks that they are spies and demands that Simeon is kept as a hostage in prison while they go back and bring their youngest brother Benjamin to Egypt. Joseph also returns their silver coins to them secretly, having them put back in their sacks of grain, which they have just bought from him. This is their test. Will they sell Simeon for their purses of silver? Will they take their money back and abandon Simeon in the Egyptian jail? Joseph wants to know if they regret what they once did to him, for they once sold him to the Midianites for 20 pieces of silver. Clearly, they are reformed characters. Reuben offers to take care of Benjamin when he takes him to Egypt and offers his own sons as guarantee to Jacob that he really is serious about looking after Benjamin if he takes him down to Egypt on their next trip. This is later on in chapter 42. Judah, another brother, makes a similar offer in Genesis 43. And so they set off for Egypt a second time, this time with Benjamin, and with double the amount of silver, in order to repay for what they had inadvertently taken without payment the first time, as well as buy more grain. In other words, they have become trustworthy, honest men. Joseph then receives them and is very emotional at seeing his only full-blood brother, Benjamin, who had been also born of Rachel, as I say, like himself. The brothers are astonished when they find themselves seated in order of their age. How on earth could this foreign official know the order of their age? But they don't twig that it's Joseph. And they're also astonished when they see that Benjamin has 5 times the portion of food than any other of them. Again, it's another test. But they still don't recognize it's Joseph. Will they be as jealous of Benjamin and his good fortune as they once were of Joseph? And again, Joseph instructs that their money be hidden in their sacks of grain once more, but this time he adds his own silver cup into Benjamin's sack, Genesis 44. Benjamin is then apprehended with the stolen cup and condemned to slavery in Egypt. Judah, who had been one of the leading conspirators against Joseph, then pleads with Joseph to take him instead of Benjamin and allow Benjamin back to his old, aged father, because they now recognize that Benjamin was special to Jacob, like Joseph had been before him. In other words, Judah and the rest are truly repentant of their past deeds, and they now can live with the fact that these two sons are extra special to Jacob because they were born of Jacob's first love, Rachel. It is at this point, then, that our reading today takes up the narrative. Joseph can bear the subterfuge no longer. His compassion gets the better of him. His brothers have passed all the tests, and so he comes out of hiding and declares himself. Generously, Joseph clears the chamber first, so that the Egyptians do not have to hear of their shameful acts towards him. Joseph does not take his revenge, as they initially fear, but forgives them, and sees in his remarkable story of being sold into slavery, yet becoming Pharaoh's equal, God's providence at work. You didn't send me here, but God did, he declares in Genesis 45. Well, actually they had, and they shouldn't have. But we know what Joseph means. Joseph displays great forgiveness and faithfulness to his brothers. It is a powerful and dramatic story. It reveals the heart and purpose of God. There is an important symbolic aspect to Joseph's story that we see repeated again and again throughout the Bible. Through the suffering of one person, many are saved. Joseph suffers at the hands of his brothers who sell him into slavery, depriving him of home, father, family, and freedom. Yet this sinful action was used by an all-loving and all-seeing God to bring ultimate salvation, not only to Joseph, but through his remarkable progress from slave to vizier, God was able to bring salvation to his sinful brothers too. What is sometimes overlooked is the international dimension to this Jewish tale of salvation. Through Joseph's spirit-inspired dreams to prepare for 7 years of famine after 7 years of plenty, the Egyptians and other neighbouring countries are also saved from famine because the Egyptians have the stocks. The sufferings of various kinds endured by Moses, Elijah, Jeremiah, and Isaiah of Jerusalem follow a similar pattern. Yes, there are some very narrow nationalistic passages within the Old Testament which reflect the mood of the many times of oppression and fear that the Jewish people suffered over the years. But I suppose that's a natural human reaction. When you feel the world's against you, when you feel you're under pressure, you turn in on yourself, you look after yourself and your own. And that at times is precisely what the Jewish people do. But that's against a broader background of the many instances of a global calling, which gives a cosmic dimension to their pains. We see this particularly in the call to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, to be a blessing to all peoples of the earth. We see it again in Isaiah of Babylon's cry that the exiled people shall become a light to the Gentiles. And we see it even in the story of Jonah, who tries his best to avoid being the instrument of God's mercy to the despised citizens of Nineveh, but finds that God's desire to save them cannot be thwarted even by running away to sea. All these stories, and others besides, lay the foundation for the ultimate story of the salvation of many through the suffering of one. Today's story of Joseph, in which God saves both Jew and Gentile, by the suffering of one man, Joseph, in which the Father receives his Son back, whom he thought was dead, lays the foundation for the Christian belief that what God accomplished in Jesus was to be for the benefit of all humanity. God didn't crucify Jesus, we did. But God's desire for our salvation found a way to turn even that tragic and diabolical deed to our advantage. And he sent the church out to share that good news with the world, because an inclusive faith is not a new idea. Amen.